The azure skies of Earth were unmarred except for the occasional wispy cloud, a stark contrast to the impending chaos. Amongst the calm, a silent streak of brilliant light cut across the horizon, unnoticed by the bustling life below. The object, a sleek metallic spacecraft, slipped through the atmosphere, its destination a secluded clearing far from prying eyes. Inside the craft, Lyra, the ship's commander, monitored the landing sequence with practiced ease. Her skin was an ethereal shimmer of blue, typical of the alarian species, whose home was galaxies away. Beside her, her first officer, Zara, with her distinctive green hue, watched Earth grow larger on the display screen. "Our mission is clear," Lyra said, her voice calm yet carrying an underlying steel. "We find the human known as Evan Miles. He is the key to our survival." Zara nodded, her eyes narrowing. "The prophecies were specific. His unique genetic makeup is compatible with ours. Without him, our race faces extinction." As the spacecraft touched down silently, hidden by the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, the two officers prepared for their mission. Their race, renowned for their peaceful exploration and advanced technologies, was on the brink. Evan Miles, an unsuspecting human male, held the genetic key to their future. Lyra and Zara disembarked, their bodies adjusting to the gravity and atmosphere of Earth. They cloaked themselves with invisibility, a standard precaution to avoid detection. Their search led them to a small city, where Evan was known to reside. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Lyra and Zara, another spacecraft descended upon Earth. It harbored the Crixans, rivals of the alarians, with their own designs on Evan Miles. Tensions between the two races had escalated into skirmishes, and now both sought Evan for their salvation. In the city, Evan went about his day, oblivious to his cosmic significance. He was a young engineer, brilliant yet modest, living a life filled with routines and small joys. His ability to attract alien interest lay dormant in his DNA, hidden even from himself. Lyra and Zara tracked him to a local cafe. Concealed by their cloaks, they observed him from a distance. His easy smile and unassuming nature did nothing to betray his importance. "Our approach must be subtle," Lyra whispered. "He must not feel threatened." Zara agreed. "We need to integrate into his life smoothly, gain his trust." The plan was set into motion. Lyra took the form of a human, adopting the appearance of a new employee at the company where Evan worked. Her transformation was flawless, her human guise indistinguishable from the real thing. As she started her new job, Lyra found herself drawn to Evan's kindness and intelligence. Her mission was clear, but his genuine warmth posed an unexpected complication. She had to remind herself of the stakes, their survival against the shadow of extinction. Back in the shadows, Zara kept watch, ensuring that no Crixan interference would jeopardize their mission. The rivalry between alarians and Crixans was old and deep, fueled by centuries of conflict and competition. The first chapter of their Earth-bound odyssey had begun, marked by the silent dance of cloaked spacecraft, the convergence of alien destinies, and the unknowing young man at the center of an interstellar chess game. Lyra and Zara were prepared to fight for their future, but the question remained. In the dim light of early morning, Evan Miles strode through the bustling city streets, unaware of the celestial forces aligning against his mundane reality. As he walked, Lyra, in her flawless human disguise, matched his pace a few steps behind, her eyes sharp beneath the guise of casual indifference. Evan entered the towering glass building that housed his workplace, a hub of technological innovation. Lyra followed, her credentials as a new employee granting her unhindered access. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with the low hum of computers and the soft clatter of keyboards, a symphony of productivity that Lyra had studied but never fully experienced. She approached Evan under the pretense of needing guidance with a project, her voice smooth and professional. "Hi, Evan. I'm Lyra. I just started in R&D. Could you help me understand the latest project specs?" Evan turned, his eyes meeting hers, a smile breaking across his face. "Of course, Lyra. Happy to help a new colleague. Let's grab a conference room and go through the details." As they sat across from each other, Lyra scanned Evan's features, noting the subtle cues of his human expressions. She relayed information back to Zara through a concealed communicator, confirming that she was now directly engaging with their target. Meanwhile, the Crixans, led by their fierce commander Kale, had established their own base of operations in a derelict warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Kale, with his rugged features and sharp, calculating eyes, watched a holographic display of Evan's daily routines, piecing together his own strategy. "We strike when he's isolated," Kale muttered to his second-in-command, a towering figure named Dex, whose skin bore the dark red markings of a Crixan warrior. "We can't afford a public spectacle. The alarians must not succeed before we have our chance." Back at the office, Evan explained the complex engineering concepts to Lyra, who feigned confusion to prolong their interaction. As they talked, she sensed his innate goodness, his eagerness to assist without hesitation. It was a trait she found both endearing and useful. Lyra gradually steered the conversation towards personal topics, hoping to weave herself seamlessly into Evan's life. "What do you like to do outside of work, Evan? Any hobbies?" Evan's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Actually, I love hiking. There's nothing like being out in nature, you know? Clears the mind." "Maybe you could show me some good spots sometime? I haven't really had the chance to explore since I moved here," Lyra suggested, planting the seed for a deeper connection. "Sure, that sounds great," Evan replied, his smile genuine. He seemed pleased at the prospect of sharing something he loved with someone new. Their meeting ended with the promise of future interactions, each with potential for Lyra to fortify her place in Evan's life. As she left the conference room, her thoughts were a mix of professional satisfaction and a surprising hint of personal pleasure. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, oblivious to the alien drama unfolding within its heart. Lyra reported her progress to Zara, who monitored from the shadows, her mind calculating every possible outcome. Kale, too, watched from his darkened lair, his plans sharpening like a blade. The game was in motion, with high stakes and hidden players, each poised for a chance to claim the most valuable prize, Evan Miles. The air was crisp, as Evan led Lyra through the winding trails of the Cascade Mountains, his favorite escape from the digital confines of his urban life. As they hiked, the dense canopy overhead filtered the sunlight into a mosaic of light and shadow, an ideal cover for Lyra's subtle observations. Evan talked passionately about the natural world, pointing out details, a bird's call, the pattern of moss on a rock, that Lyra, despite her extensive training, had never been taught to appreciate. She listened intently, realizing that this connection was her best opportunity to weave herself deeper into his trust. Zara, meanwhile, monitored their progress from afar, her equipment hidden in an unmarked van parked on a nearby overlook. She kept a vigilant eye on any Crixan activity, her sensors sweeping the area for any trace of their unique energy signature. Kale's strategy had evolved. He and his team, cloaked and cautious, moved through the urban shadows, gathering information and resources. Their plan required precise timing and the element of surprise. They needed to intercept Evan at a moment of vulnerability, and the secluded trails he frequented with Lyra presented a potential opportunity. In the growing bond between Lyra and Evan, a routine began to form. Their weekly hikes became a shared ritual, during which Lyra subtly tested the waters for introducing the idea of her people and their needs. However, she was careful not to reveal too much, too soon. Each piece of information was a calculated risk. During one of their discussions, Evan, ever the engineer, mused about the possibilities of alien life. "Do you ever wonder if we're truly alone in the universe?" he asked, his gaze lost in the vast expanse. Lyra's heart skipped. "I think it's more arrogant to assume we are alone than to believe we have cosmic neighbors." "What would you do if you met someone from another world?" she probed gently. Evan laughed, a sound full of warmth. "I'd ask them about their technology first, I guess. Then maybe I'd try to be a good host. Why? Do you have a secret to share?" She smiled, her cover intact. "Just wondering. You seem like someone who could handle such a revelation." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden rustle in the bushes nearby. Both paused, the isolation of their location suddenly feeling more ominous than serene. Zara's voice crackled in Lyra's earpiece, a whisper of urgency. "Alert! You have movement heading your way, possibly quicksand. Be ready." Lyra's training took over. She steered Evan away from the path, her eyes scanning for the slightest movement. The forest seemed to close in around them, every leaf and shadow a potential threat. Just as they rounded a bend, two figures stepped onto the path, blocking their way. The quicksands had made their move. Kale stepped forward, his presence menacing. "Evan Miles, you are coming with us!" Lyra positioned herself between Evan and the quicksands, her demeanor calm but her body ready to fight. "That's not going to happen." Evan, confused and alarmed, looked between them. "Lyra, what's going on?" She had no choice now but to reveal a fraction of her truth. "Evan, trust me, please. I'm here to protect you." As the tension spiked, the forest held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The standoff in the forest intensified as Kale and his second, Dex, tightened their stance. Lyra, standing protectively in front of Evan, felt her muscles tense, ready to spring into action at the slightest provocation. "Step aside, Altharian," Kale growled, his voice low and threatening. "This human is pivotal to more than just your survival." Evan, bewildered by the rapid unraveling of his normal world, looked from Lyra to the imposing figures of Kale and Dex. "Lyra, what's happening? Who are these people?" Before she could respond, a high-pitched whine filled the air, and Zara emerged from the brush, her weapon drawn and aimed at the quicksands. "No one is taking him anywhere," she declared, her voice steady and commanding. Kale smirked, unfazed by the escalation. "You think you can stop us? There are more at stake here than your outdated prophecies." Dex, shifting his weight, seemed to prepare for a physical confrontation. His size and strength were formidable, a stark contrast to the lean agility of Zara and Lyra. Lyra turned slightly, keeping her eyes on the quicksands while addressing Evan softly. "Evan, these are quicksands. They're not here to help you. I am here to protect you. I promise, I'll explain everything, but right now we need to get out of here." Understanding the gravity of the situation, Evan nodded, his trust in Lyra solidifying despite the surreal circumstances. "Okay, I trust you," he whispered back. As tensions reached a breaking point, a distraction erupted unexpectedly. A series of loud noises and flashes from further down the trail signaled the arrival of Earth authorities, unintended allies summoned by a hiker who had witnessed the earlier confrontation. Seizing the moment, Lyra grabbed Evan's arm. "Run!" she urged, pulling him down the trail as Zara laid down a suppressing fire to cover their escape. Kale and Dex, momentarily taken aback by the arrival of human law enforcement, used the chaos to disappear back into the forest, blending into the shadows from which they had come. Lyra, Evan, and Zara raced through the trees, dodging branches and leaping over roots, driven by adrenaline. Once they were certain they had distanced themselves from the immediate danger, they slowed to a stop, panting and disheveled. Evan, still processing the rapid turn of events, turned to Lyra. "You owe me a huge explanation," he said, his voice a mix of fear and frustration. Lyra nodded, her expression grave. "Yes, you deserve that. Let's find somewhere safe first." They found refuge in an old abandoned cabin Zara had scouted previously for emergencies. Inside, Lyra finally shared the truth with Evan. "My name is Lyra, and I'm from the planet Altharia. My people are dying, Evan. A genetic flaw. We need a compatible DNA to survive, and yours is the key. We came here to ask for your help, not to force you." Evan sat, absorbing her words, the weight of his newfound importance settling on his shoulders. "Why me? How is this even possible?" "It's a long story involving ancient cosmic alignments and genetic mutations. But know this, we're not the only ones who need your help, and the others, the quicksands, they're not asking, they're planning to take." As the reality set in, Evan's mind raced with implications not just for himself but for the entire human race. He looked at Lyra, a mix of awe and uncertainty in his eyes. "What do you need from me?" Lyra took a deep breath, her voice soft but resolute. "Your trust, your cooperation, and maybe your DNA. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cabin, mirroring the dark uncertainty of the night ahead. As the dusk morphed into deep night, the small cabin became a crucible of tension and planning. Evan, now aware of his critical role in an interstellar survival drama, sat with his head in his hands, trying to assimilate the new realities he faced. Lyra and Zara, although seasoned in cosmic affairs, were also unsettled. The stakes were personal, their mission teetering on the brink of disaster. "Let's sort out our next steps," Zara proposed, her voice slicing through the thick uncertainty. "We need a strategy that secures Evan's safety while we negotiate with our command for further instructions." Evan looked up, determination slowly replacing his initial shock. "And what about the Crixons? What's their endgame with my DNA?" Lyra exchanged a glance with Zara before responding. "They likely need it for the same reasons we do, but their methods are more direct and far less humane. They won't hesitate to use force." "Then we need to be prepared," Evan said, his engineering mind kicking into problem-solving mode. "Do we have a way to defend ourselves or to hide?" Zara nodded, tapping on a handheld device that projected a holographic map of the area. "There are a few options. We could move to a more secure location, maybe one with strategic advantages, or we could set up traps, use the terrain to our benefit if they come after us again." Lyra paced slightly, her thoughts racing. "Hiding might buy us time, but it's a temporary solution. We need allies. Evan, your government, could they help?" Evan scoffed lightly. "Even if I could convince them without sounding insane, it would take too much time. We might not have that luxury." "Then we go on the offensive," Zara suggested boldly. "We track them down first. We know they want Evan, so he's our bait." Lyra stopped pacing, considering Zara's plan. "It's risky, but with the right preparation it could work. We make them think they're ambushing us, but we turn the tables." Evan ran his fingers through his hair, a nervous habit. "Okay, but I'm not just going to sit around and wait to be kidnapped. I want to help, really help." "Good." Zara smiled slightly, appreciating his courage. "We'll need to train you, teach you how to handle some of our technology. It won't make you a soldier overnight, but you'll be better prepared." They spent the rest of the night going over their makeshift plans. Lyra showed Evan some basic defensive tactics while Zara scouted nearby locations suitable for their trap. They decided on a dense forest area with natural choke points that Zara and Lyra could fortify. As dawn broke, they moved to the new location, a secluded grove surrounded by thick underbrush and towering trees. Here they set up their equipment, small but powerful devices capable of creating a variety of deterrents, from energy shields to holographic decoys. Evan, despite the gravity of his situation, was a quick study, his natural curiosity and sharp intellect adapting to the alien technology with surprising adeptness. "How does this work?" he asked as Lyra handed him a compact device that resembled a wristwatch. "It's a personal shield," Lyra explained. "It will deflect physical and energy-based attacks, but keep it charged, and don't rely on it to make you invincible." As they prepared their defenses, Evan felt a new sense of resolve. He was no longer a passive participant in his fate, but an active player in a cosmic game. The knowledge was empowering and terrifying in equal measure. With their preparations complete, they camouflaged their position and settled in to wait. The trap was set, and the hunters, now turned prey, would soon arrive. The trio was ready, each playing their part in a drama that spanned stars and sentiments, a test of trust and tactical acumen in the silent shadows of Earth. In the quiet shadows of the early morning, the forest around Evan, Lyra, and Zara hummed with the concealed energy of their preparations. They had chosen their ground carefully, a natural bottleneck near a cliff's edge that limited the approaches and favored their defensive strategy. Evan checked his newly acquired gadgets, his fingers tracing the lines of alien technology with a mix of awe and anxiety. "I never imagined I'd be gearing up for an alien confrontation on a Tuesday morning," he muttered, trying to lighten the mood. Lyra offered him a small, encouraging smile. "Life is strange that way," she responded, her focus sharp on the sensors that dotted her wrist device. Zara, always vigilant, kept her eyes on the surrounding trees. "Movement to the north," she whispered into her communicator, her voice barely above a breath. "They're early." Kale and his team, cloaked in the dim light, moved with stealth but not enough to evade the advanced detection systems Lyra and Zara had deployed. The air grew tense, the silence deepening as the moment of truth neared. As the Crixons advanced, Evan felt a surge of adrenaline. He was no soldier, but he stood ready beside Lyra and Zara, bound by a shared purpose. The devices around them hummed to life, creating a barrier of light and energy that shimmered quietly between the trees. Kale halted, his figure emerging from the shadows as he assessed the barrier. "You think this will stop us?" he called out, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet woods. "We don't want to stop you, Kale," Lyra called back, stepping forward so he could see her. "We want to talk." Suspicion flickered across Kale's rugged features, visible even at a distance. "Talk," he scoffed, "after you've set a trap." "It's not a trap for violence, but for negotiation," Zara added, her tone firm. "You need Evan, and so do we. There must be a way to share what he can offer without conflict." Kale was silent for a moment, considering. His gaze shifted to Evan, measuring, calculating. Finally, he stepped closer, his body tense, but his weapons lowered. "And if I agree to this negotiation, what guarantees do I have?" "Our word, and our shared interest in survival," Lyra answered. "We are not your enemies, Kale. Our methods differ, but our goals are aligned." The standoff continued, each moment stretched thin by tension and uncertainty. Then, slowly, Kale nodded. "Let's talk then." The energy barrier dissipated as Lyra deactivated it. They gathered in a clearing, the morning light finally breaking through the canopy, illuminating the makeshift assembly. Discussions unfolded, with Evan's input proving crucial. He offered his help to both parties, proposing a cooperative scientific venture to explore and utilize his genetic gift without coercion or harm. Negotiations were tense, filled with technical jargon and cautious trust-building. They drafted agreements that included protections for Evan and provisions for sharing research and benefits. Both alien leaders, Lyra and Kale, signed, each acknowledging the unusual but hopeful path ahead. As the meeting concluded, Evan stood between his new alien allies, a bridge between worlds and a symbol of potential unity. "So, what now?" he asked, looking between Lyra and Kale. "Now we work together," Lyra said, a sense of relief in her voice. "We start by ensuring your safety and setting the groundwork for our collaboration." Kale nodded, his demeanor softer than when he had arrived. "And we ensure that this alliance remains strong, for all our sakes." With the forest around them beginning to stir with the sounds of the waking day, Evan, Lyra, and Zara turned back towards their temporary base, their steps lighter than before. The threat of conflict had given way to the promise of cooperation, and while the future was uncertain, it was filled with the hope of what could be achieved when former foes chose to forge a new path together.